Good afternoon, everybody, or it might be a good morning if you're in other jurisdictions. My name is Bev Lang. I'm the Executive Officer with Elder Abuse Action Australia. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia on which we meet today and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and in particular I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Darkinjung land today. It's a little beautiful part of the country north of the Hawkesbury River in New South Wales. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. These sessions give our members the opportunity to showcase their work and share this shared knowledge with and experience with a growing audience of people from the sector and community members. Please use the chat to ask any questions or to make comments. And of course, as usual, please be respectful in your interactions with each other and the speakers that have given up their time today. As we have multiple presenters for this session, please include the name of the presenter your question is directed to in the chat. Each presenter will respond to as many questions as we have time for. And in this particular panel discussion, they'll be asking each other some questions, so you'll get to explore with them through the course of the presentation. Should you need the closed captions, it's on the bottom of your screen, so please just check that option should that be required. And of course, this session is being recorded so that we can share it with you as registrants, but also people, participants, but also people who registered for this session. It'll also be published on the Elder Abuse Action Australia website in due course. We will have Q&A at the very end of the session, so but of course you're welcome to make comments through the course of the panel discussion. And at the very end there'll be a quick feedback survey, and we appreciate you answering that for us to give us some further feedback. So today's session is being presented by representatives of the Elder Mediation Australasian Network, or EMAN for short. We are fortunate to have three presenters today representing EMAN, speaking about elder mediation, preventing and addressing elder abuse. Elder mediation is a collaborative rights-based process that supports older people to participate in decision-making about their lives directly or indirectly, and with or without capacity. This session will explore how elder mediation differs from other forms of mediation and the vital role it plays in preventing and addressing elder abuse. Our presenters will dive into how elder mediation provides a specialised approach to decision-making that places the rights and safety of older people at its core, the knowledge, values and skills required to practice elder mediation, including understanding ageing, capacity and intergenerational family dynamics, and how mediators are trained and accredited through EMAN under Australia's first recognised mediation specialisation. Our speakers today are Professor Dale Bagshaw, who is the founder and chair of Elder Mediation Australasian Network and a certified elder mediator in advanced within the Elder Mediation International Network, where she serves on the International Board and Certification Committee. An adjunct professor at Adelaide University, Dale has led national and international research on family violence, elder abuse and conflict resolution, and was instrumental in developing South Australia's first strategy to prevent the abuse of older South Australians. She has delivered elder mediation training across Australia and New Zealand and led the successful proposal making elder mediation Australia's first recognised mediation specialisation. Nick Carter, who is a dispute resolution practitioner with the Office of Public Advocate in South Australia and a board member of the Elder Mediation Australasia Network. Through his private practice, Lotus Creek Mediation, he provides elder mediation, family dispute resolution and conflict coaching. He holds a Master of Dispute Resolution and is completing a PhD at Adelaide University on the impact of elder mediation in residential aged care. Fiona Tait, who is a board member of EMAN and an advanced certified elder mediator with the Elder Abuse International Network. She works with Relationships Australia, New South Wales in the Let's Talk Mediation and Support Service, helping older people and their families prevent and resolve conflict. Fiona's background spans counselling, criminology and community services, supporting vulnerable groups across aged care and victim support. I'd now like to introduce Professor Dale Bagshaw, who will open today's session with a presentation before inviting Nick and Fiona to join her for a conversation.
Thank you, Bev. I've got James who's sharing the screen for me. And along with Bev, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming from, which is the Kaurna people in Adelaide, South Australia, and pay my respects, our respects, to their elders past, present and emerging. The UN definition of older person is anyone who is 60 years or older. But I noticed in today's paper that our government is now talking about a much older age range. The UN defines people as being oldest old if they're from 80 to 99. So I'm part of the oldest old. And then we have many more people who are centenarians. And I think in the future we'll see many more again because people are staying younger for longer. However, a number is not necessarily indicative of the cultural, spiritual, mental, and cultural, physical, mental, and spiritual attributes of each unique individual. With changing demographics in Australia, we have advances in healthcare, living standards and technology, an increased life expectancy, lower fertility rates, and now ageing baby boomers. I'm part of the war baby generation, but the baby boomers soon will be moving into their 80s. At present, 16% of Aussies are aged over 65. By 2060, this is likely to have increased to approximately 25%, or a quarter of the population. Almost 95% of older Australians live at home, a quarter of them alone, and a non-Indigenous girl born in 2012 can expect to live for 94 years, and her twin brother, almost 92. And unfortunately, though, there is a much lower life expectancy for Indigenous children. In 2018, for the first time in history, people aged 65 or above outnumbered children under 5 years of age globally. I just want to start by saying that I think ageism underpins most, if not all, forms of elder abuse. Older adults can encounter discrimination in differing circumstances, such as in their families, community activities. Yesterday, I was talking to someone who's dealing with neighbourhood disputes. He said there are many more people now who are in the old age bracket engaged in those sort of disputes, gaining and maintaining employment in healthcare, and particularly how the care is managed, treated or mistreated. And some people perceive old age as a process of degeneration and a lack of productivity. I think it's important to point out that in elder mediation, we need to understand generational differences. The concepts and constructs of ageing, abuse, rights vary across generations, and each successive generation has very different attitudes, values, and beliefs than the preceding generation. As a war baby, I'm often lumped with the silent generation. The war babies are often missed out of any talk about how to divide up the generations. They're very, very different to the baby boomers. Each generation learns from and is influenced by previous generations. So what is elder mediation and how does it differ? I'm just going to here briefly look at the Elder Mediation International Network definition, and you'll notice that the word conflict and the word dispute is not in the definition, because in elder mediation, we're often just trying to assist people to have difficult conversations. Elder mediation is a focused, preventative, respectful process, usually multi-party, multi-issue, and intergenerational. The mediator facilitates discussions, focusing on strengths, and assists participants in stating their wishes, their concerns. And this form of mediation, more often than not, includes many people related to the older person or to the issues that are being discussed. So one of the ways it differs from other forms of mediation is that it includes a much larger and more varied number of participants. Where possible, it includes the older person. Sometimes the older person wants to come with a support person or with an advocate, or maybe a supportive or substitute decision maker if the older person lacks capacity. More often than not, includes members of the older person's immediate or extended family and significant others who are involved with the care of the older person. It could be unpaid carers, paid carers, nursing home staff, hospital staff, GPs, social workers, psychologists, or any person or professional who is related to and needs to be there related to the older person or to the issue. The other differences are that in elder mediation, the focus is on specific issues and challenges that relate to ageing. It takes into account the dynamics, whether they be intergenerational dynamics or family dynamics, and the unique considerations that arise in the context of ageing. There's a very strong emphasis on preserving or improving relationships, on fostering understanding, on empathy and effective communication, on positive interactions, and on maintaining or strengthening family and community connections, taking a much broader perspective, which could be called the ecosystems perspective. Research has indicated that there is a need for special education training and research in this field. It's underscored the importance of expertise, particularly to ensure the empowerment of older adults in elder mediation sessions. For this reason, the Elder Mediation Australasian Network, along with the Resolution Institute and with support from Relationships Australia, sent a submission to the Australian Mediation and Dispute Resolution Accreditation Standards Board. We sent that in 2024, and in August 2025, fortunately, elder mediation became the first AMDRAS specialisation. It involves initially 30 hours of online training, and the training has to be conducted by an EMAN certified mediator at the advanced level who has training experience. And there are also additional Elder Mediation International Network certification requirements, because the basic certification process is one that has been developed over a number of years by the Elder Mediation International Network. And if anyone's interested, I can send copies of all sorts of things that will help you to understand in particular what is required. If you are going to be a trained elder mediator, then you need specialised knowledge and understanding in a number of areas, particularly the nature and effect of ageism, not only on the older person and others, but also on yourself as an elder mediator. You need to understand normal ageing and the individual and family life cycle, family dynamics, intergenerational relationships. You also need to understand things like loss, grief, and depression, because there are a lot of losses that older people experience. Dementia and other cognitive impairments, misuse and abuse of power, not only in families but also in institutions, elder mistreatment, neglect, abuse. And EMAN has a special document that we have assisted in developing called Safeguarding Older Adults Guidelines for Elder Mediators, a copy of which is on the EMAN website. You also need to understand capacity, decision-making capacity, whether it be mental or legal capacity, and other legal issues and considerations. You also need specialised knowledge and understanding of the nature and effect of progressive diseases and chronic illness on older people and their carers, human rights, adult guardianship laws and other relevant legislation, palliative care, end-of-life decision-making, voluntary assisted dying, financial estate planning and management, relevant community systems, services, resources, the impact of living arrangements such as assets for care, etc., the impact of culture, gender, diversity, rurality, ageing, ability or disability. And again, EMAN has a special code of ethics for elder mediators, which we have assisted in developing. And it's very important that elder mediators understand that code of ethics and abide by it. And also you need to keep on top of evidence-based and peer-reviewed research. You find in elder mediation we use much more facilitative and therapeutic forms of mediation. Quite often need to use co-mediation because there are often large groups. We need to spend time preparing everybody, but particularly the older person, in pre-mediation meetings. And in those meetings, screen for elder abuse and capacity to participate in the mediation. We need to know how to facilitate the involvement of the older person, whether or not they have capacity, whether it's directly or indirectly via somebody else. How to involve the support people, the advocates, a substitute decision maker if necessary. How to manage a multi-party mediation. And one of the things elder mediators need to do, and that they often do, is develop interdisciplinary understanding and collaboration with a lot of people in the network of older people, and develop and strengthen supportive networks, particularly where older people are either isolated or vulnerable to abuse. The challenge for elder mediators is how can the mediation process empower older people in what we know to be an ageist society? Ageism is like the air that we breathe. It's very hard to know and notice when it's happening. In elder mediation, we focus very much on person-centred decision-making, on positive images of ageing. We actually acknowledge and focus on strengths in individuals, families, communities, their environments. We respect older adults' right to choice, autonomy and independence, provide opportunities for older people to be engaged in the process, increase options and choices, involve, as I said, the broader social network and build support there, and identify and mobilise resources. Just want to focus next on what I mean by person-centred elder mediation. Elder mediators ensure that older people are respected, valued and engaged as partners in care planning and the provision of services, receive clear communication and education that enables them to be engaged at all levels of decision-making if possible, that they're able to self-determine as many aspects of their lives as possible, that they're empowered to participate in decisions and choices that affect them regardless of their capacity, have their will, preferences and wishes heard, understood and respected, and that they consent to all decisions where possible about their care, their support, and where necessary are supported by others. Their rights are upheld and respected, and that they receive care and support that responds to their social, cultural, spiritual and economic background, to their location, to their symptoms and disease progression needs, their will, preferences, goals, and actual or potential abuse or neglect. I just quickly go through some examples of issues that can be addressed in elder mediation. There are many family issues, intergenerational relationships, grandparenting issues, new marriage and step-family issues. A lot more older people are becoming separated, divorced. Where there's elder abuse and neglect, it's useful as an early intervention or a preventative strategy for family businesses, including farming businesses, financial issues, financial planning, residential and aged care. Useful when preparation is needed for that and during the transition, and of course when people are in aged care, palliative care and end-of-life decision-making, voluntary and assisted dying, public advocacy and guardianship issues, complaints, including aged care complaints, progressive dementias, other cognitive impairments, religious issues, retirement issues, safety. We get a lot of people who are adult children who are concerned about their older parent who they think is driving unsafely, mental health and mental health care, employment, human resource management, housing, living arrangements, gender diversity issues, and particularly when it comes to aged care, care for the caregiver, Indigenous issues, migrant refugee issues, and finally, but not completely, there are many more, elder law issues, safeguarding issues, estate planning, enduring powers, wills, assets for care, etc. So that's just a starting list. But, you know, I think as we have many more older people in our community now, you'll find older people in many, many different places needing assistance. I like the Australian Institute for Family Studies definition of elder abuse because it includes that issue of imbalance of power, which I think is central to most forms of abuse. I think the rest of you understand the common definition, which is a single or repeated act or failure to act, including threats that result in harm or distress to the older person. So it occurs when there's an expectation of trust or when there's where there's a power imbalance between the party responsible and the older person. I must just say that the abuse of older people, I've done some research in this area, I think it's still under-researched and a hidden problem. It occurs across the spectrum of our society. It's still often unrecognised, unreported, and hard to detect. And some families or cultures don't recognise that their behaviour is abusive or label it that way. It can involve an act of commission or an act of omission, which can be intentional, willful, deliberate, or malicious, or unintentional, benign, passive, or reckless. The primary factors underlying elder abuse are the ageist, sexist, and racist community attitudes leading to discrimination, neglect, and or the marginalisation of older people, and a lack of respect and concern for their safety, their preferences, their interests, their needs, and their rights. Many elder abuse victims, and we found this in our research, feel they can't let anyone know about their abuse. I probably haven't time to go through this list, but they include threats, fear of all sorts of things, that they're going to lose their relationships, they're going to be put into care, sometimes shame, humiliation, sometimes self-blame or guilt, not being aware that it's abuse or not being aware of options, cognitive impairment, of course. It may be love for the abuser, concern, feelings of family loyalty, or older people may not realise or identify that abuse is occurring. Many more other reasons. I want to just finish by saying that elder mediators can provide a context and a process that enables the voice of the older person to be heard whether it's directly or via some other method or person, and their interests, will, preferences, needs, and rights to be understood by everybody and respected. It can provide opportunities for older people to take ownership of and be empowered by the decision-making process. It offers mediation as a preventative early intervention strategy where there is risk or allegations of abuse, or where there's actual abuse, make sure that families and the older person are connected to appropriate resources. And elder mediators can address the ages, sexes, and cultural contexts in which abuse may be occurring, and importantly, develop interdisciplinary understandings and collaborations, and involve, strengthen, or develop the social support network surrounding an older adult who may be isolated or vulnerable to abuse or exploitation. On the EMAN website, you'll find those two documents, links to those two documents I've mentioned. And next slide will show you if on the Compass website, there is a feature that I wrote and put there. It's called Mediation of Age-Related Issues, if you want to read some more. And there's much more information on the Elder Mediation Australasian Network website. I now want to move away from my presentation to asking Fiona and Nick, Fiona Tait and Nick Carter, who are both members of the EMAN Board, to join us for I'm going to be asking them some questions. So Fiona and Nick, if you can join us. Thank you. Okay. I've given them these questions in advance. So Fiona and Nick are both highly experienced elder mediators. They've both got the advanced EMAN certification. And Nick, as you pointed out, is now embarking on a PhD degree, which I congratulate him on. So my first question is, in your experience, what common issues involving potential or actual elder abuse do older people or their families bring to elder mediation? Fiona, would you like to start?
Yes, I mean, in terms of elder abuse, I suppose the most common one that we would hear in our service is, at the Let's Talk service, is psychological abuse coupled possibly with financial abuse, and then sometimes neglect. So psychological abuse might be people saying, look, I'm really worried about my mother or father or an older person because someone's being unkind to them, or someone's restricting what they can do, is speaking rudely to them. You know, I'm just concerned that they're not able to you know, challenge a person who might be being unkind to them. So that would be a psychological abuse. And then sometimes people say things like, you know, mum or dad is being stopped from seeing their grandchildren, or, you know, they're being coerced into things. So that might lead into a financial abuse where the threats made towards older people to do things they might not want to do, like sell their properties, to hand over money, or to go into residential care to assist their adult children, or there might be pressures for them to lend things or give finances that they're not sure about. And then there's also neglect, where people, you know, maybe other family members, other people are concerned that an older person is being neglected in terms of their care needs, or not being, if someone's looking after them and helping them, they're not being taken to medical appointments, or they're not being given their medication when they should. So those are the sorts of concerns that sometimes people call us about, and sometimes want to mediate, to have a conversation within the family about what they're going to do about the situation.
Thanks, Fiona. Nick, your turn.
Yes, I agree with Fiona. We see financial abuse, sadly, all too often. But I think in our area of work, we do also see instances where a carer has isolated an older person from the rest of the family, and maybe using their role as a substitute decision maker to estrange or alienate that older person, and I suppose they're at higher risk in that situation. And then there's this phenomena of family abuse, where you have an older person in the middle of a conflict, and you have warring factions on either side who wish to overshare with that older person. And if they're living with dementia, that type of toxic stress is exactly what they don't need. So we see that a lot as well, sadly.
Thank you. And for different reasons, many older people don't want to report abuse if the perpetrator is a family member. What role can you as an elder mediator play where there are allegations of abuse by a family member, or somebody just asked a question about an imbalance of power? What role can an elder mediator play there?
I think, I mean, Nick would have things to say on this as well. I think elder mediation can sometimes bring a kind of a clarity and a focus and an ability to come together to plan and build in some strategies. It can bring actually a lot to a family that is having some difficulties. I mean, it's not unusual for us to hear allegations made by family members, and sometimes it's quite interesting that different family members may be accusing each other of things or also feeling victimized themselves. So there's quite a bit of exploratory work to do before you bring people into mediation. You've obviously got to check for safety. But what mediation can do effectively is kind of shine a light on what is actually happening. And once you've got a bit of clarity, then people can actually, they're much more empowered to begin to make some decisions, because quite often it's a kind of a pea soup of people not really knowing quite what's going on, sometimes making assumptions, sometimes coming to the wrong conclusions. So it's a way to kind of calm things down and open things up to just to see what's going on and get a clearer picture, I think.
Good. And Nick, for different reasons. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I'd agree with Fiona, absolutely. I think, that essential quality of mediation where we're trying to create a safe space for the family, but particularly for the older person who may be really reluctant to explain what's been going on. They obviously love their family and they don't want to necessarily get them in trouble, but they also are beginning to understand that some of these behaviours are impacting on them, and so there's an educational component to it. But that safe space, that confidential private space where we can have a one-to-one conversation with the older person, allows them to express their wishes and preferences, and often it's clearly that they want those behaviours to stop.
And really, you spend a lot more time in that pre-mediation stage than maybe you do in another form of mediation, in particular with the older person, just making sure that they're comfortable participating, or if necessary, using shuttle mediation where they're not in the room with the perpetrator. Is that something you do a fair bit too?
Absolutely. It really is driven by the older person. Often it takes a little bit of time for them to feel that they can trust the mediator and open up and have a really, the type of conversation that allows us to really bring their voice into the mediation room if they're not going to be present themselves. But that decision is really largely driven by themselves.
And Fiona, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think time is very important. And also, quite often people who are abusing don't realize that what they're doing is abusive. Quite often they feel they're being very caring and being very helpful. And that idea of imbalance of power, it's a negation of an older person's voice and their wishes. And sometimes they feel that the person caring for them or doing things for them is able to take charge, and they won't challenge it. And so that can be insidious. It can just expand and expand because no one's actually calling it out or calling any limit. So what we try to do with, and it's not just the older person, with other members of the family when we're supporting them in elder mediation, is to empower them to understand that they're able to speak up, that if it's safe to do so, and to empower them to do so, you know, and help them understand that some of these things are not okay, and that older people have rights just the same as anyone else to say what they want to do, where they want to live, what they want to do with their money or their home. And sometimes that can get lost in families, especially when you've got family members with, you know, status, power, education, and sometimes physical power. So it's important to, as Nick says, in that safe and confidential space, be able to talk to people about what's really important.
And in these situations, what sort of involvement do you have of other people to make sure that the plans are safe and the older person is not being subjected to further abuse? What sort of things do you do?
I can answer that. Well, I think it's possibly unique to elder mediation, the number of participants that we might include and the wide range of participants. So we would obviously include the older person and the immediate family, but then caregivers, nurse practitioners, doctors, geriatricians, of course, social workers, almost anybody that has a role in the care and protection of that older person could be included in the mediation, which does mean that there is a big commitment initially to that pre-mediation work. But when you finally do then bring everybody together in one form or another, it really can be very decisive.
And Fiona,
yeah, I mean, we do the same thing. Our service is funded by government, so it's freely offered in New South Wales to older people and their families through Relationships Australia. And we don't deal with crisis. So if we feel people are really in crisis, we will refer them to the appropriate authorities, the police, or the New South Wales Ageing and Disability Commission Elder Abuse Helpline that can provide strategies to support them immediately. But we are growing a collaborative practice throughout, you know, all the services, as Nick was saying, so that even before any mediation starts, we try to introduce services if they're not already on board, or social networks, because as Nick said earlier, that isolation an older person makes them much more at risk of elder abuse. So we try and broaden the network, find out who's involved. Often it's interesting when people call us to ask them, what have you actually done? You're concerned, but what have you actually done so far? Who have you spoken to? Quite often they haven't spoken to anybody. They've just held these concerns and they speak to one service. If they're not the right service, they might go round and round the houses before they actually find a service that is actually able to assist them. So we try to work closely with lots and lots of other services, so immediately we can put them in touch with relevant services who can provide appropriate information, often around situations which could be legal or financial, or even around care. So that's what we tend to do, and we tend to do that right up front. We've got a casework team as well that will do that, separate from the mediation team.
good. So what do you need to consider when deciding whether or not to proceed with a mediation after you've had those pre-mediation meetings and you've heard the allegations? What do you need to consider?
Oh, well, we have a duty of care to do no harm, of course, and we've got, you know, our safeguarding policies and guidelines, and we can escalate to supervisors. But I think, you know, as we've been saying, there's always allegations and counter allegations of abuse in this line of work. So, you know, I think what we can do is we proceed cautiously. We're, you know, constantly alert to the risks, aware that we could discover more evidence as we go. But certainly, I think elder mediation has that protective component. So, unlike perhaps other mediations where if there is abuse evident, that may be a no-go, with elder mediation, actually, it doesn't stop the mediation from proceeding and going forward.
And
Yeah.
particularly in the Office for the Public Advocate, where you actually get a lot of referrals that involve abuse, Nick, don't you? Yeah. Okay. And
And
Fiona,
I mean,
what do you
yeah.
need to consider? Yeah.
I mean, I think for us, absolutely, as Nick was saying, safety is really important, and that is focused on the older person, but sometimes it's the safety of other family members as well. And it's also around capacity, and there's the capacity that we think of as cognitive ability, but it's also the capacity to actually effectively engage in mediation, to be able to understand what it is, to be able to really get involved and be part of the decision-making processes with older people. So sometimes that means that, you have to provide other services and support, such as translators and support people, or advocacy or information beforehand, just to make sure that when people actually come into a mediation, they really have they've got all the support that they need to be able to have the discussion that they want to have. Because otherwise it's not going to be, there is that imbalance of power, in fact, and especially for older people, to make sure they feel really comfortable to be there if they're going to talk about things that are important to them.
Thank you both. And can you give me an example, Nick? I'll start with you, of a de-identified case involving allegations or actual elder abuse that had an outcome that safeguarded the older person and strengthened family relationships, which is often what the outcome is. Nick.
Yeah, so we had a matter come to us where a substitute decision maker for an older person had been accused of abuse. It was both psychological and physical, and it was the aged care provider that had alerted the police. They'd been, I suppose, advised by the police to actually restrict access to that substitute decision maker. So it put the decision-making role at risk. We were brought in to see if we could help both with the task conflict, which was to see whether that particular family member would voluntarily renounce their role as a substitute decision maker, which they subsequently did, but also to look at the relational conflict and see whether there was a way that the family and the aged care provider and the older person could somehow restore their relationships, and was there a plan that could be put in place for a staged reunification.
And the outcome was successful for everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was and all the way through that, the older person felt that she had the control that she needed, and was able to dictate the terms of the reunification, and to be really central to the whole process, which was really essential for her.
Thank you, Nick. And Fiona, could you give everybody an example of a case you've dealt with?
Yes, I mean, they can be quite lengthy and quite complicated. So this is an amalgam of a very common, a number of common cases that have come into us around financial abuse. So there's an elderly couple who came in to talk to us because they were really very concerned that they were not going to have any money left, because they had two sons, and one of their sons was constantly, our adult son, constantly requesting large amounts of money. He was gambling, and he had fallen on hard times. He wasn't working, and the parents were really getting to a point where they thought, we aren't going to be able to help him much anymore. We've all nearly run out of money ourselves, gone through our savings, and what will happen to him when we have nothing to give him? They were very, very concerned about him becoming homeless and destitute. So they were quite desperate because they loved him. And during all this time, the two brothers had actually come into conflict, because the other brother, who was quite organized and self-sufficient, was very angry with his brother for what he was doing to his parents. So he had a mediation. The son, who was financially abusing his parents, came in. He was incredibly sorry. He acknowledged what he was doing. He admitted he wasn't very good with money, that he had money issues all his life, and some agreements were made. sadly, he wasn't able to stick to them, and we were concerned around that. So in the interim, lots of referrals were given to the parents about how they could secure their funds. They had some financial counselling. They had some couples counselling as well, because it was putting a lot of strain on them. And the son was offered supports as well. So we came back for a second mediation, and it was a more candid conversation around, well, it doesn't seem like you're able to, for the son to cope with on your own with what's happening, because he hadn't reached out to services. So at this point, he said, I can see that I'm struggling. And so more proactive measures were put in to help him actually engage. We actually helped him to engage with some of those services to get some support. And by this time, his parents had really secured their finances, so that if he requested money from them, they actually had a third party who he needed to go through to get to be able to access any cash from them. And the other nice thing that happened after that was that we did a mediation with the two brothers around their relationship. And again, the brother who had been abusive was able to apologize to his brother, to acknowledge the hurt that he'd caused his parents, but also the whole family relationship. And again, what was lovely was that brother was very forgiving and kind, and said, I can, you know, I want to be here to support you. You know, I don't want us to be isolated. So it took a while. But mediation is able to, when it works well, when there's love there, to repair some damaged relationships. And also, again, by bringing in a lot of services, because, you know, there are a lot of services that we needed with this particular type of case. The services can support people to make things better for themselves.
Thank you both very much. I think we've run out of our time. So Bev, I think, was monitoring the questions. I think we've got, much time, about quarter of an hour left, have we?
Yeah, almost quarter of an hour, yes, indeed.
Okay, yes.
And thank you everyone for all the questions. There are some pretty interesting ones in here, and I think the first one from Helen was already been answered about that power imbalance. So as with coercive control, and this is to any panelist who wants to answer the question, it's difficult to include the controller. Is the elder interviewed before mediation, typically in your circumstances?
I'll just quickly say that all people who are trained as elder mediators understand what coercive control is. I've done a lot of domestic violence research as well, and there's an overlap often between domestic violence and elder abuse, and sometimes it's continuing domestic violence into old age. We spend a lot of time in elder mediation interviewing people in what we call the pre-mediation stage, to determine who should be involved, how they should be involved, when they should be involved. And sometimes people are excluded. Sometimes shuttle mediation is used. That means seeing people separately. But certainly the coercive control, we hope, would be identified in the screening for abuse in that pre-mediation sessions, and an approach would be taken that would deal with it. Fiona and Nick, would you like to respond? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult area, because persuasion is often seen, or care is often, you know, mistaken for what is actually coercive control, and taking over. So it's something that we unpack quite thoroughly with older people, but also with family members, to actually really try and understand what's going on and look at what's triggering this behaviour. I mean, as we sort of suggest in some of the case studies, that sometimes you need to support the person who is the most in trouble, and often it's the person perpetrating the abuse. So it's to try and deal with that. But certainly, if things are in our service, if things are very hot and quite risky and unsafe, we would definitely be referring people to other services to support them.
And Nick, would you like to comment?
Yes, I agree. We will see perhaps examples of where family members may unwittingly be acting in ways which are abusive, but certainly where dementia is part of the equation, that adds extra risk. But for example, you might find that the family members may believe that as soon as there is a dementia diagnosis, that means they can make all the decisions for mum or dad. And that becomes, in a very well-meaning way often, but that's certainly not the way they should be supporting that older person. And of course, that can cause conflict as well between family members.
Mm. And I think what's interesting too, Nick, is I think, individually and collectively, better understanding the continuum of capacity is a really interesting one for all of us to ponder and learn more about. We've been having conversations internally and externally, considering, a person might have capacity for some decisions, but not for others. When we were doing some national plan research a couple of years ago, I was speaking to a couple of people living with dementia, and they still could drive their car because it was a repetitive activity, if you like. But neither of them, and they said this, would be trusted with the family budget because it was a different kind of thinking and process. And I think the more we understand that, we can better support older people in different circumstances and maybe kind of, I don't know, diffuse some of the stress and tensions of some of the reasons that people need mediation in the first place. I'm not too sure which question to go to next, to be honest, to all of you. I think I'm going to take the who usually pays the mediator. I'm going to take that offline, and we'll respond to that after we've chatted to you separately. A quick question: do you anticipate an increase in elder abuse with the release of home care packages and the new aged care reforms? I will just add that to that scenario.
I anticipate the increase in elder abuse, full stop, because I think it's going to be very difficult for older people and my generation, and even for baby boomers now, to get the sort of care and support they need, which means they're often going to have to rely on family members. And maybe family members won't be in a position to be able to offer the support that they need. And I am concerned about the fact that it's now become far more expensive for people to get care.
I think that's true. I mean, the research suggests that it's not people coming into your home who are the abusers, from services. You are much, much more likely to be a victim of elder abuse from a member of your family. And that can be unwitting. It can sometimes be people taking on a role of a carer when someone's care needs are initial, and then over time they escalate and escalate. So there's a lot of sometimes carer burnout. People just don't know, I can't get the support they need, and it becomes very, very difficult for people. And I think Dale's absolutely right. The escalating ages, escalating care needs, the idea of people, quite rightly being able to stay at home for as long as they can and as long as they want, means that they may need much, much more care over time in their homes. And there is that kind of inheritance impatience or inheritance preservation that's going on because of the incredible cost of housing and rent. So it makes it very difficult for families to deal with. Yeah.
And to me, it seems a shame, and I'll come back to you, Nick. It seems a shame that it's one of the many areas across kind of social issues that prevention, where we can sort of put a stop to or educate people a little bit better earlier on about what the options might be, because you can easily see that there's lots of opportunities for intergenerational households where it's of benefit to all parties, and sometimes there are just the relationships are just too difficult to manage in that circumstance. Nick, if you want
I
to
would,
sort
I
of
would
jump in here.
I'd agree with everything you said, and I'd probably argue then that elder mediation has a role at an earlier point. Fiona and I tend to be working with families that have reached a bit of a crisis point, late stage. But I would argue that with the increasing shift towards in-home care, perhaps there would be a role for someone who could help a family have a difficult conversation around future planning. Most families are a bit avoidant around those sorts of discussions, so an elder mediator can help the family craft a really robust plan for the future right through to end of life, and have those types of really difficult conversations which most families are quite reluctant to have.
I think it's a great suggestion, Nick, because I know the people, in my circle struggling to find the right language, and I think families struggle to find the right tone of how that conversation begins and how it then continues.
I mean, Bev, I've noticed in the chat, people are talking about the difference between abuse in families and abuse in other situations, such as that absolutely people are, older people are sometimes scammed, and, that's very common. And there are lots of other abuses that go on which are outside the family, absolutely. But often there are different mechanisms and protections there. The difficulty, I think, for abuse within families is that there's a taboo, there's an unwillingness for people to report because they want to maintain relationships. They love the people who are hurting them. So it's a very complex and dark and grey area. And that's where mediation can help, because it can support everybody to get some help in the situation that aren't automatic triggers which can bring in other services to do something, who have authorities to do something. Whether to report or not, it's not evidentiary in the same kind of way as being scammed or be taken advantage of by a tradesperson or something like that.
Yeah. And look, I know we're coming very close to time, and I'm looking at 14 new questions that are in the chat, and I haven't got to the first dozen or so.
If people want to email me, I can. My email address is just dale.bagshaw at either UniSA or adelaide.edu.au. UniSA is now becoming Adelaide University, but either email would get me, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I can pass on questions to Nick and Fiona. There'll also be an online course available by the end of the year if people are interested in doing any training, so they can contact me about that too. So,
and I think that what we'll do is we'll gather all the items in the chat, and we'll have a conversation with the three of you just to form up those responses, and we can include that in communication to everyone that's registered for this webinar. I'm sure people will. There's obviously a lot of interest. You can always tell with the number of questions. It's either an incredibly important topic, it's an incredibly emotional topic, and a lot of people don't have enough answers or know who to go to find answers and information. So again, an incredibly important session today. I'd like to thank the three of you, Dale, Nick and Fiona, for talking with us today and sharing your insights. It's clearly been an important and valuable one. And thanks to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. We'll be circulating the link to the recording very, very soon to everyone who's registered, not those that sort of 135 or so that have watched us today. And it'll also be published on the EAAA website, eAAA.org.au, and on our YouTube channel. These Lunch and Learn sessions are now held monthly, so please join us on Thursday, the 11th of December, for our final session for 2025. We'll be joined by Rachel Wass, CEO of Meaningful Ageing Australia, who's going to explore spirituality as a superpower for ageing rights, rights, dignity, and the future of aged care. If you're an organisational member of EAAA and you'd like to present some work in 2026, please contact James at membership@eaaa.org.au. And if you're not a member and you're feeling incredibly jealous of EMAN and other organisations, please reach out to us and join up. The Australian Elder Abuse Conference Stand Up Speak Out is set for the 27th to the 29th of July next year on the Gold Coast. So those East Coasters who are sick of cold winters, please book that into your calendars. Registration is now open and we're working through program development as we speak. Thank you again so much to our speakers today, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. We look forward to connecting with you in December.
Thank you, Bev.
Thanks so much.